What's up in War Eagle War Report family? You got Ike Jones. We are back with another morning drop. Today, we are talking about the departure of Donovan Kaufman and Cam Riley to the transfer portal and what that means for Auburn. Y'all know how we do right here, War Report style. Let's drop it on them.
You are now listening to the War Report. Drop.
Morning drop. It is Wednesday, January the 17th. You got Ike Jones in here doing the due diligence and talking to y'all a little bit about Auburn football and all of the things happening with Auburn football. Make sure that you get in here, and we are going to get the conversation started talking about Cam Riley. But before we do, make sure that you are sharing this video out there on all of the social medias at the War Report. Make sure you are liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and we definitely appreciate that. If you're re-listening to this on podcast, and go ahead and give us that 5-star review and share that content with somebody else. But let's get into the conversation. Again, we'll get it kicked off talking a little bit about Cam Riley and his departure from Auburn football. Cam is the linebacker, 6'5", 242. Mixed results in his time at Auburn. And let me start here in saying that these guys have announced their intent to hit the transfer portal, and, they could potentially come back. I don't know. I haven't asked either of them whether or not this is definitive, but they have, announced their intents to hit the transfer portal. But Cam Riley in his time, 4 seasons at Auburn, the last 2 seasons is really where he got the vast majority of his snaps. Finished his Auburn career, if this is the end, with 86 total tackles. And, I think he really was just kind of getting to the point where he was coming into himself later on in the season. His run stopping ability had improved the last couple of games of the season. I'm looking at like his PFF grades on his tackling, right? He's one of the best tacklers on the team last season, but you saw his production and his ability to be where he was supposed to be improve as the season went on last year. And then, going into the bowl game, you heard Coach Hugh Freeze talk about him getting his production up and then potentially even moving over into a spot where I know a lot of Auburn fans, at least the ones that I've had conversations with, that thought he could potentially move to be a jack linebacker and be more of a contributor in that way, rushing the passer or being the outside. His coverage skills were pretty decent, actually, as a linebacker. He had improved vastly in that. So there was a lot of speculation about what, his role was going to be in this defense going up next season or coming up into this next season. But, he has entered the transfer portal or announced his intent to enter the transfer portal. So that's going to be a big miss, or not a big miss, but there's going to be a big hole left by Cam Riley in the defense. Let me make sure I have this correct. 66.7 overall is his PFF grade. That's good for the 22nd best on the team. 16 total tackles on the season, and he was number 16 on the team in snaps and number 10 overall on the team in tackles from last year, with a total of 26 tackles. So pretty good amount of productivity, right? So, guy who is in the top 10 on your team in tackles on the season is going to be gone. So wishing the best to Cam Riley, and hopefully he'll be able to, find a place that works best for him in his final season. He is a senior, or he was a senior last year, so this is going to his 5th year of eligibility. So looking forward to seeing what Cam Riley is able to do and where he lands. So best of luck to him. Moving on to the next one, Donovan Kaufman. This one I think was a little more surprising for me. I actually thought maybe Cam Riley was going to hit the transfer portal just because of the linebacker class that we had coming in, and when Eugene Asante announced he was going to be coming back, you knew you were going to have Austin Keys back. I just didn't know where the snaps were going to be coming from for him unless he moved out to that jack position. But then you got, the flip for Jamonte Waller in, and it's just like, oh man, where are the snaps for Cam Riley? Donovan Kaufman, on the other hand, this is a guy who, of course, we had an opportunity to talk to him at a fireside, and We've got a decent relationship with Donovan. He was happy here at Auburn. Um, but I think he just saw his role start to diminish as the season went on. Early in the season, he was a really major contributor to the Ron Roberts defense. And, as things started to progress throughout the season, his minutes went down, his total snap count went down. And so just maybe didn't see a place for him going into the next season. And then you see the recent acquisition of another safety from the transfer portal, which shows, that they are still trying to find the right pieces for what they want to do for this defense in that safety room. And just didn't see a space for him. But Donovan Kaufman, again, another key contributor for the Auburn defense last year. He 68.6 overall was his PFF grade. That was good for 17th if we're ranking, PFF grades for our defense last year. He was number 11 in total snaps last year and 7 in total tackles on the team. So 2 guys in the top 10 in tackles on the team, no longer with the team via these latest additions to the transfer portal. Again, Donovan Kaufman, a guy who his snap count kind of steadily decreased after the LSU game and really only got back to a heavy snap count in the bowl game with Jalen Simpson not playing in that game. So there are a lot of things to be missed about Donovan Kaufman, a very disruptive player. I think that star position is one that I expected him to shine in. Again, I don't really even know what the star is going to be, whether it's the nickelback, whatever they want to call it. Him at that cornerback position or that safety, that box safety, was a havoc maker. He was a guy who was really good when he was pressuring the passer. He was good at being able to just cause disruption. So it's going to be a guy that's going to be missed. And when I looked at the landscape of where this Auburn defense is and the number of guys that are not coming back now, you're seeing about 50% of your total snaps and productivity walking out of the door, whether that's graduation, out of eligibility or the transfer portal. So there's a lot that needs to be replaced with this Auburn defense. So whomever is going to be the co-DC alongside Charles Kelly has a lot of work to do as far as trying to figure out how to get guys that don't have a ton of experience acclimated to whatever this new defensive scheme is going to be. So you're going to be installing new scheme, new philosophy, but also having to do that with a lot of folks that haven't played a ton of snaps. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there where, you don't have the continuity in the defensive scheme, but you do have kind of a fresh canvas to paint on because so many of these guys don't have to learn something new. This is going to be the first thing that they're learning. But experience is definitely going to be something that's going to be missed now. And in your safety room, you've taken a big hit with Zion Puckett, Jalen Simpson, and now Donovan Kaufman not in there, Marquise Gilbert not there, which makes the acquisition of Jaron Thompson that much more important now because you don't have as much experience now returning. If you're projecting starters, somebody asked, I think maybe it was yesterday about, a 2 deep, what would you expect to see out there at the safety position? And, we talked about Caleb Wooden potentially being there. And Donovan Kaufman is one of the guys that I expected to rotate in and play a heavy minutes at safety based upon what he had already done and some of the things that we see as far as a lack of actual minutes being played, a lack of experience in that room. Again, Jaron Thompson now being added to that gives you a lot of snaps back to that total snaps available that have already been played for that position. But losing Donovan Kaufman, I think, is going to be a big blow as far as being able to get up and running quickly with guys that already know what they're doing. Still very talented room, though, right? When we look at the players that are currently in that safety room, there's still a lot of talent that hasn't really had opportunities yet. And now with Donovan Kaufman moving on, maybe those guys get another opportunity. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Auburn gets active in the transfer portal again to try to replace Donovan Kaufman, or maybe he had already let them know that this was his intent and that's the reason for the move. I'm not sure on either of those things, but definitely a lot to sort out in terms of what's going to be happening on defense. That linebacker room losing Cam Riley, the safety room losing Donovan Kaufman, 2 very experienced pieces there. Last thing I'll mention before we get over into the comment section is just a reminder that this week is Auburn versus Vandy in basketball. Tonight, Auburn basketball is going to be traveling up to Vanderbilt, up to Nashville to take that team on. So that's happening tonight. So if you are in the Nashville area, the Nashville fan base is already really engaged. So I'm sure I don't have to remind you guys to get up there and take a look at that game to support the Tigers. And then tomorrow, the women's basketball team faces Vanderbilt. The week of Vandy, the Tigers versus Commodores in basketball is going on. So make sure that you guys are up there in Vanderbilt to support those things going on with the basketball team. All right, we're going to get over into the comment section and see what you guys are talking about today. As always, the morning drop is brought to you by our show sponsor, Rogue Shop. Make sure you head over to rogueshop.com. Use code RAPPORT. America's #1 online dispensary is the Rogue Shop. Sleep, stress, pain, anxiety, relief, all there at the Rogue Shop. Again, rogueshop.com. Code RAPPORT. When you do that, get a little something off the purchase. Let them know the War Report sent you. I am going to get over here into our comment section and see what you all are buzzing about this morning. Appreciate everybody for dropping in with me today. A lot of people talking about this. I guess we can mention it on here because I see quite a few. I'll get Ant Robinson says that, yes, 9 is going to flourish there. He will show why they should have never let him go. Speaking of Robbie Ashford, who recently announced his destination from the transfer portal is over to South Carolina. So props to Robbie Ashford. Hopefully he does well in his new uniform up there in South Carolina. JJ Brand jumps in and says, doesn't the portal close today? Why wait so late? Do we have some linebackers incoming? The portal technically was closed already. There's all these extenuating extensions and circumstances around certain people. And I don't know if either of those guys, both of them were in their 4th year, so maybe they have graduated already. But that, I think, is the more curious thing. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. The timing of it all is just weird, right? Like, why wait? Why, if your intent was to transfer, why wait so late? But I think maybe some of it has to do with a lot of the changing landscape around that defense and new DC coming in and different philosophies and schemes, and maybe you just don't want to go through that again here at Auburn. I don't know, because transferring, you have to go through that with a new defensive coordinator somewhere else and in a newer environment. I don't know what the reasoning is, and I haven't asked specifically to those young men about what led to their decision, and more so the timing of that decision, because it is very interesting. Because where you were on the depth chart probably didn't change very much between when the portal opened post bowl game and today. And I doubt that they've had an opportunity to really talk very much to anybody about anything differently that was going to be happening with them, their role, or any of that sort of thing, right? Like the timing for Donovan Kaufman with the Jaron Thompson addition, I think maybe those things are related, but I don't know that definitively. That's just, that's me making a guess. That's not me hearing anything. But that was a little more interesting. As far as other linebackers coming in, I don't know that they're in a hurry to go and get any additional linebackers. When you look at the linebacker core for Auburn right now, if you're going to be playing 4-2-5-ish defense that's going to rely on 2 primary linebackers, you have Austin Keys and Eugene Asante coming back with that group. So you already have kind of your first wave of linebackers, and then you've got some really talented freshmen that you can rotate in, and some guys that maybe haven't played a lot of minutes for you so far, but are in that linebacking core. I'm thinking about guys like Robert Woodyard, right? Like, so you have some guys that are going to be on the team that can come in and fill in at the linebacker spot. Let me just kind of take a look at the snaps here. Of course, you losing Larry Nixon, Jake Levant still there, Wesley Steiner, Robert Woodyard. Those are really the only guys that are still available, so Robert Woodyard and Wesley Steiner would be able to fill in. But again, you've got some really talented guys. You did pick up the guy from Duke already in your linebacker room, and you have the talented freshmen that are going to be coming in. So we'll see what happens with that. But I do expect some of those younger linebackers to actually play quite a bit. And then you have some hybrid guys that are playing in the safety room that could potentially fill in and do some linebacker style duty. Thinking about guys like Sylvester Smith in particular. So we'll see what happens with all of those things. But definitely going to miss the productivity of those two young men. Chris S. jumps in and says, let's be real. If Keontae Scott is trying out outside cornerback, we need DK at star. And this is, again, why it was a little more curious to me because, Keontae Scott had expressed his desire to play at the outside. And, so that means that middle safety slash star slash nickelback slash slot corner, whatever you want to call it, depending on what the defense and the scheme is going to be up for grabs. And Donovan Kaufman likely was going to play a lot of those minutes. That is something I think Caleb Wooden plays fairly well at. So, he can slide down into that spot. And again, the aforementioned Sylvester Smith could come in and play in that role as well. So we do have some guys that can play there, but no guys that have a ton of experience. It'll be interesting to see, and I haven't spoken with him yet, whether or not this is something where now Keontae Scott feels like he needs to step back into that to be maximum effective for the team, or if he's going to continue to want to play on the outside and see what happens there. So going to be interesting to see how things work out with how they shuffle those folks around in the defensive secondary with the new coach there kind of guiding the ship as far as specifically safeties with Charles Kelly. So Chris S. jumps back in and says, anybody expecting Robert Woodyard to dip? A lot of hype and expectation, but he hasn't seen the field. I'm going to be honest again. This is another person who I did expect to potentially hit the transfer portal just because of, what you just said, a lot of hype and expectation, and he hasn't really had a lot of opportunities. I think that's all really dependent from his standpoint on what his options were out there, and then whether or not he felt as if, this additional year was going to provide him with more opportunities going into it. I've never spoken with Robert Woodyard, so I don't really know where his mind is as far as what his expectations coming into the season are going to be, whether he's one of those, let me just go through the spring and see what's going to happen there. But I did honestly, being honest, I did expect for him to potentially leave just because, those opportunities weren't there. But as I just mentioned, the linebacker room thinned out quite a bit, even with some of the younger guys coming in. So maybe he sees, potential for opportunity there for himself. We will see what happens. Chris S. jumps back in. What are Jaron's strengths? Speaking of Jaron Thompson, is he a linebacker safety hybrid, hard hitter, coverage guy, high IQ? We will definitely talk more about Jaron Thompson once we get into his film. I've got some film stuff that we want to get into. So, Chris, we will answer all of those questions. In short, though, he is really more of a coverage guy than he is, in the box. Well, looking at his PFF grade, so let me not judge by anything because I haven't looked at a ton of his tape yet. His ability to tackle in space was questionable at times last season, just looking at his tackling grades on PFF. But he does seem to be a willing tackler, right? He's a guy who will come down and play in the box, pause. But he is a guy I think that will be able to fill different types of roles for Auburn in the secondary. So hopefully he'll be able to do that this season, but I will evaluate that more specifically as I get into his tape here over the next week or so. Chris O giving some insight says better than Puck in coverage, just not his strong suit. Darren is definitely in the box. So box safety is what Chris says that he is. So looking forward to taking a look at his tape and seeing what he can do. JJ Brand jumps back in and says, is it possible that the defensive players were told who the new DC will be and their scheme is different? Odd that both jumped in the portal at the same time. I guess it's a possibility, right? I don't know. And again, I haven't spoken with anybody. We did get a chance to talk to DK a little bit, and I didn't speak with him specifically, but Mike G had an opportunity to talk with him, and he did not mention anything of that nature to him, but I don't know that he asked the question specifically. But I mean, I guess it's possible that they got wind of kind of what the the philosophy was going to be, and maybe they wanted to, but I don't know why that would, unless we're changing to like a 3-4 defense, which means that you're going to have more linebackers on the field. That would impact Donovan, but that would also help Cam, right? So like I don't know what the change in defensive philosophy could be that would push both of those guys to the portal based upon defensive philosophy changes, because the number of guys available in any defensive scheme would benefit one over the other, right? So for both of them to leave at two different positions, if they were both the same position, then I would lean more in, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't know. And it doesn't seem to jive with me unless they are hiring somebody who's like, oh no, I'm never playing for that guy, right? Like, and then that would make sense. But I don't think a philosophical change on defense would. Ant Robinson jumps in and says, we have a lot of young talent in the DB room. The scheme is what determines who and how many. Colton Hood has come on as a surprise to most coaches, and they want him to play as soon as possible. I liked what I saw from Colton Hood in the bowl game. I think he competed really well out there, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he's going to be utilized here coming up this next season. So he's someone who I would definitely look towards as being a factor in the competition for starting snaps or for snaps coming up into the next season, just based upon how I saw him compete in the bowl game. He seemed to know where he needed to be. He was solid in his limited duties out there during that game. Of course, made some mistakes, but definitely solid. And what I saw from him, very willing tackler, good in coverage. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds for him. Let's see here. Chris S. asks a good question here. What three linebackers would y'all be okay with having on the field at the same time? Of course, we're going to say Eugene Asante and Austin Keys. Ooh, that third linebacker, though, right? I mean, you'd have to say, based upon who's currently in the room, it'd have to be Wesley Steiner, right? Like, I mean, Robert Woodyard hasn't played enough for me to say comfortable. So, I mean, there's not really anybody else. It's going to have to be Wesley Steiner or some freshman. Actually, no, I'd have to take the guy from Duke as the third guy, because I watched his tape and he seems like he's, pretty smart and knows where he needs to be downhill against the run. So it would have to be Austin Keys, Eugene Asante, and the transfer from Duke would be the three guys that I would go with on that one. All right. I think that's it for today, and I appreciate you guys coming in here and talking a little bit with me. As always, the Morning Drop is brought to you by our folks over at Rogue Shop. Make sure you head to rogueshop.com. Use code REPORT when you do. Get a little something off your purchase. America's #1 online dispensary is Rogue Shop. We will definitely be back at you all tonight with the midweek report, talking a little bit more about all the things happening with Auburn sports, including giving you a preview of the Vanderbilt game. Before you get out of here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all of the necessary things. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.
Drop!